Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Delpo, and I am the manager of older adult services at the Denver Public Library. And I am thrilled to be here today, bringing you this discussion with Skye Bergman about her documentary, Lives Well Lived. At DPL, we define older adult as anyone 50 plus, and we provide information, programs, resources to enable people 50 plus to embrace aging and to view their older adulthood as a time of growth, lifelong learning, reflection, meaning, joy, all the things. In other words, we help you live and live well, to match the theme of today's documentary. I'm very happy to be partnering with our friends at Changing the Narrative to bring this program to you today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. As we sort of said at the beginning, you are all muted. And even though we would love to hear from all of you and hear your voices, with such a large group, that's just not practical. But we still want to hear your thoughts, ideas, questions. So if you have a question or a comment, please put it in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat throughout the program. And I will bring questions and themes to Skye's attention later on. So just put things in the chat and I will take note of them. Closed captioning is available if you'd like to turn that on. I believe you'll see like 3 or 4 little buttons. You can click on that and then it'll say captions and then it'll say more captions. So if you would like closed captioning, please feel free to turn that on. If you have trouble, put it in the chat and I'll try to assist you. We are recording. This recording will be available for just a limited time after the program ends. And then the last thing is it is possible that we will be doing breakout rooms toward the end, depending on how many questions we get. If we do breakout rooms, please return to the main group after your breakout room ends, because we're going to identify themes and we're going to talk about what's next for Skye and for us after the breakout rooms. So with that, let's get started. I am always honored to welcome our moderator, Janine Vanderberg. Janine, I consider a good friend and a dear colleague. She's a co-founder and current senior strategist for Changing the Narrative, which, if you don't already know, is a campaign to change the way people think, talk, and act about aging and ageism. She chaired the Encore Network, a global coalition of leaders who champion the civic, social, and economic contributions of people 50 plus. And she did that from 2016 to just recently to March 2023. She's a former commissioner, she's a former member of the Denver Commission on Aging, and she won the Mayor's Diversity and Inclusion Award for her advocacy for older adults. Over the years, she has changed the narrative around aging for so many people, including Denver Public Library staff, our patrons, and me personally. And for that, I thank you, Janine, and I applaud you. And I turn this program over to you. Everyone, please welcome Janine.
Amy, thank you so much. And I wish you could introduce me everywhere. I always feel great when you introduce me. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And I hope everyone had the opportunity to view Skye's and to screen Skye's film, Lives Well Lived, which was her directorial debut. But beyond that, Skye is an award-winning photographer. Her fine artwork is included in permanent collections at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Brooklyn Museum, Seattle Art Museum, Santa Barbara Museum of Art, and the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Her commercial work has appeared on book covers for Random House and lots of others, and magazine spreads in Smithsonian, Arthur Frommer's Budget Travel, Reader's Digest, and Archaeology Odyssey. She is a professor emeritus of photography and video at Cal Poly State University in California. She has 2 short films about intergenerational connections, currently on the film festival circuit, and is currently working on a feature-length film that is a celebration of love. So please join me, and you can raise your hands like this in welcoming Skye Bergman. All right.
Oh, thank you. That's a great introduction. I need you to introduce me everywhere as well. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this a reality. And thank you to the audience for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm going to actually share my screen because I always think that it is a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of Lives Well Lived and how it came to be, because this was my first film. And so I always say, if I can do something like this, you can too. It really started with a love of my grandmother, who was an amazing cook. And like all good cooks, never wrote a recipe down. And so I decided, she came out to visit me for the first time when she was 96 from Florida, and I live in California. And I decided that I would start filming her, because not only did I want the recipes, but I wanted her voice and the way that she made the food. And I wanted to be able to capture that. And so for 4 summers, she came out from the time she was 96 to 100. And we did a film series that we called Cucina Nana, little 1 or 2 minute video clips. And when she was turning 100, as you saw in the film, I went back with her to Florida for her big birthday celebration, and she was still working out at the gym. She did not start working out until she was 80. So it is never too late to start something new, even working out at the gym. And I was looking at approaching 50 and looking for positive role models of aging, and just not seeing them in the media. I was seeing everything about what we could do to avoid aging, to look more youthful. But let's face it, the one thing we have in common is that we age every day. And I wanted that to be celebrated. I saw this in my grandmother, who was just an amazing role model for me. And I wanted to find other just incredible people out there that could be my role models as I moved beyond 50 and moved past that half-century mark. And so I spent 4 years interviewing 40 people with a collective life experience of 3,000 years, and just really listening to their stories and finding out a little bit more about what made them who they were, their stories of resilience, their stories of the things that they went through, their words of wisdom, and really what a wonderful gift that was. I think many times we don't slow down enough to really listen to people. And I had that gift of 4 years to really just listen to people, to be with them, to experience who they were and what made them tick, and what I could take away in my own life as I was moving forward. And so I always like to say that my grandmother gave me the greatest gift, which is that I feel like I had 40 new grandparents after doing this project. And I'm very close with all the people in the film. It's just been such a joy. And they have led to other films and other projects that I'm doing. And I was lucky enough that I released a film at a time before the pandemic. So I got to travel all over the country doing a film festival circuit. We had a great theatrical release. We're on PBS. We screened with AARPs, movies for grownups. But really, the best part of this whole process has been the people that I met and the friendships that I made and the connections to older adults that I had. I was lucky. In my life, I grew up in an intergenerational household. There were 4 generations in my household. My great-grandmother lived to be into her 90s. And so I had that connection. But a lot of students that I was teaching, because I teach at a university, don't have that connection. And so I was lucky enough to pair up with a professor who teaches a psychology of aging class. And we put together what we call the Lives Well Lived learning module, where we pair up older adults and students. They watch the film together, and then they work together for a quarter or a semester, depending on the school. They use the questions that I formulated for the Lives Well Lived film, so I had about 20 questions, as a way to get to know each other and to start a conversation and to start a dialogue. We did this during the pandemic. We went online, we pivoted, we worked with Senior Planet and made it happen. And what a great thing to do during the pandemic. And now we're back in person. So when we're in person, this was last week, I do a photo shoot of all the pairs of students and older adults that are working together. And it's such a joy to see the connections that happen in such a short period of time. And one of the things that I like to say about the work that we're doing is that we're combating the stereotypes of ageism, one story and one connection at a time. And really, the students and the older adults both learn, the biggest takeaway, I think, is that they realize they have far more in common than their differences. And really, the only difference is their age. And what a gift to at least combat that stereotype of ageism, because it's like, any other ism, when we know somebody who's in the other group, all of a sudden those isms go away and we just know the person and know that individual. And so we've been doing this for about 6 years at this point. So this is just a fraction of the people that we have touched. And if you know any K through 12 educators, this is on the PBS Learning Media site, which we'll put in the chat. There's 2 8-minute clips that educators can use, and there's all the core standards so they can plug it into their classroom. So it's been such a gift to work on this project. So that's my little slideshow there, just to get you warmed up.
I love that slideshow, Skye. Thank you. And it gives great background for maybe some of us who might not have screened the entire film, but I did, and twice. So, and one of the things that struck me, Skye, was such an amazing range of people with interesting experience. So I'm curious, how did you find them? And were people eager to share their stories? Did you have to like twist arms and convince them? Because I know very often, you know, when I've tried to talk to people and share their stories, they're like, oh, not me, it's not much, and that kind of thing. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I decided after I did that little clip of my grandmother at the gym, I put together a little 1-minute clip. And I thought, well, I want to do this crazy project. I didn't know it was going to be a film yet, but I just had this idea that I had to meet people that were positive, that were like my grandmother. And so I sent out an email blast to all my friends, my family, the alum that I've taught over the years that I've been at the university. So about 1,000 people. And I said, I have this idea for a project. Here's the 1-minute clip of my grandmother. And if you have somebody in your life that's as much an inspiration as my grandmother is to me, then please nominate them for this project. And I was inundated by heartwarming nominations. It was so lovely. And then at a certain point, when I realized that the film was going to be more than just a collection of words of wisdom, that it was also about the stories of resilience, I started looking for specific stories. Like, it was very important for me to tell the story of the Japanese American story, and to, you know, make sure that I had a well-rounded, diverse group of people that I was including. And so I specifically sought out certain stories, but it started just with an email blast.
I love it. You've got a great collection of friends, because the results were just amazing. What were the most important lessons that you came away with? I literally started watching this, like I start watching everything, and I always have a notebook in my hand. And I'm like, I want to capture this in writing, right? Because that's what I do. And then I just put my pen down at some point because there was so much. To you, what was, I guess, the most important lessons that you came away with?
Well, I think, you know, for me, there were a number of them. I think that the thing that everybody had that in common that I think is really important for everyone to know is everyone had a sense of purpose. And what I learned is that sense of purpose can change over time. And I think that that sense of purpose is so important. No matter what age we are, we need to have a sense of purpose, whether it was Lucky Louie, who got up every day to make mozzarellas for his daughter's deli, or Paul and Marion Wolf, who would go and talk to high school students about the Holocaust. It didn't matter what that sense of purpose was, but having that sense of purpose was vitally important. And then I think the other thing that for me, I really was such a huge lesson was, for those of you that saw the film, Evie Justison, who was one of the film stars, talked about reading Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and how important that was in her life. And that the thing she took away from that, and I should back up a moment. Viktor Frankl, for those of you that don't know, was a Holocaust survivor, and he couldn't determine who was going to survive based on their physical strength. It really was about their mental ability to get through what they were living through. And so her takeaway really from that book was that there's so many things you can't control that happen in our lives, but the one thing we can control is our attitude about how we deal with things. And I think for me, that was so important, especially going through the pandemic. I think that those things were those two things, having a sense of purpose and knowing that the only thing you can really control in your life is your attitude. Those things were the two biggest takeaways for me.
So, Skye, this is leading me, I guess, your last statement, to another question. Very often, because we all know about Dr. Becca Levy's research, and if we have age positive beliefs that, we will live longer and live better and more likely to recover from injury and illness and all of that. And yet often people feel like, but there's so many bad things about aging. How do we keep that attitude? Any thoughts that you gleaned about that from interviewing everyone?
Well, I loved, like I said, I was friends with all the people in the film, and one of my favorites was Lucky Louie. He lived around the corner. He passed away, unfortunately, at 97, but I would go visit him at least once a week while he's making his mozzarellas. And I remember going to ask him, I went going to visit him, and one day when he was 97, and I said, "Hey, Lou, how are you doing this morning?" And he said, "Well, it's not like when I was 95." And I mean, I think part of it is that how you accept those changes, how you deal with them, knowing what your limitations are, but knowing what you can still do and what you can still give back. And I think you can either be disappointed by the things that we can't do physically, or you can be really just so grateful for the things that we can do. And I saw that very clearly with my dad, who was one of the film stars and was actually a geriatric physician from the time he got out of med school, which was unusual back then. So he practiced for over 50 years. And he had a stroke about 11 years ago, which left him in a wheelchair, but still practicing medicine. And what I realized is that he became was much more positive person, because he learned to be grateful for the things that he could still do, instead of really thinking about all the things he couldn't do. He just was so grateful for the things that he could still do. So I think, again, that's really about your attitude and how you move through life, and how you deal with those situations that are thrust upon us.
So probably a really important lesson for all of us, right? Being grateful for what we have and for what we can do. And I will remember that the next time my knee starts aching. So Skye, as you all know, our mission at Changing the Narrative is to end ageism. How do you think this film influences people's perceptions of older people, which we know in the US are generally negative? What kind of stereotypes did you feel were refuted by people in the film?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that, like I said earlier, one of the reasons that I actually started working on this project was I just wasn't seeing the positive role models of aging that I wanted to aspire to. And I think that the film hopefully shows that positive side of aging, shows what people can still do, how engaged they can still be, what they can give back. And, I'll tell you just a little side story, which is that I always tried to take a student with me when I would interview these film stars. And I had a student named James who came with me to the interview for Lucky Louie, which, for those of you that haven't seen the film, such a great guy, so funny, so witty. And James and I, after that interview, went out to lunch, and James, with a very straight face, said to me, "Wow, I never knew older people could talk so much." And, he just hadn't been around older people. And so I think that it's, this is why these intergenerational projects are so important to me, because we have these stereotypes until we meet somebody from that other group. And I think that what I've seen when we do these projects with students and older adults is that for students, it gets them curious about the people that they're going to be paired up with, because they see these stories and these histories, and they want to know more about the older people that they're paired up with. And I think for the older people that see the film, it gets them excited about wanting to share their stories and wanting to tell somebody what their life was like, and to maybe, be able to impart some wisdom that, somebody's actually listening. And I think, I had a Q&A with a panel with a bunch of the film stars, and Paul Wolf was one of them, who was, for those of you that haven't seen the film, was escaped Nazi Germany, and just a great guy. And I stood up and I was saying, I'm so grateful to all the film stars for sharing their stories. And he got up and said, "No, we're grateful for you for collecting them, for validating our lives, and for caring enough to want to share our stories." And so that's the other side of it. It's a give and take. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this film, is that it reminds people of other people in our lives that maybe were mentors, or where we think about somebody in our lives who really meant a lot. And hopefully we want to then communicate with them and tell them that, or capture their story. So I think that the film has helped in so many levels.
I love that. And especially this idea of kind of validating people's stories. Was there anybody who was reluctant to talk to you? Maybe someone who a friend nominated and you thought this would be great. And then you went and talked to them and like, no.
Well, I didn't have that. I did have, like, my grandmother would say, why is my story so important? What, I didn't do anything. And even Marion Wolf, who escaped on the very first kinder transport out of Vienna, Austria, she would say, I didn't do anything. I just lived it. Yeah. But, I think that was part of it. But I said, look at how many people you inspired by your story. I think about, what was I doing when I was 8 years old? Would I have been able to do what you did? Would I have gotten to the UK and said, please bring my mother over, and saved my mother from something like that? And it just, I think that, sometimes there were some people that didn't really feel like their story was important. But I think once they saw it with an audience and people started recognizing them in Trader Joe's and coming up to them and telling them how much their story meant to them, it kind of validated it in some ways.
I'm seeing a t-shirt line or bumper stickers. I was in Lives Well Lived.
Yeah.
So I want to shift topics for a moment because it seemed like all the news in age land of the last week is 81-year-old Martha Stewart on the cover of Sports Illustrated, a swimsuit issue. And what I've noticed is that the reaction has kind of been all over the place. There are some people who are like, yay, Martha. Others, well, she's wealthy and obviously has had work done. And then sort of oh, is this what it's going to mean to be age inclusive, to be on the cover of a sexist magazine? Would love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think I fall into the third category. I'm grateful that there is more age inclusion, but I wish it was being celebrated in a different way. I wish it wasn't being celebrated by a cover story of someone who is obviously photoshopped and not really showing her true age. I think that age should be beautifully shown. I love all the wrinkles. I love everything about aging. I only wear lipstick. I don't wear anything to conceal anything because I feel like I've earned those wrinkles. And so I think it just proliferates the myth of what aging, it's still like that youthful aging. And so first of all, I don't like the swimsuit issue anyway, because as a woman, I feel like it just is, that. So on many levels, it was not the most positive thing. But I think what I am really excited about is that in the media and on TV shows, there are far more older adults that are being represented in a positive way. That wasn't the case when I started this film 10 years ago. There's also far more intergenerational connections that are showing up, like the series Hacks, which I binge watched, and many other series that are showing connections between older adults and younger people. And I think that is heartening to me. So I mean, I guess the Martha Stewart thing is getting the conversation going, and that's a good thing. At least we're having a conversation about it.
Okay. So thank you. And I'm in category 3 as well. I didn't want to prompt that when I sent you the question, but it's like really Sports Illustrated. Ugh. Anyway, what is your definition of, like, you've done the deep dive into this. How do you define a life well lived? And did being involved in the film kind of change your own perspective, that kind of when you look back, you're on your own life, what is a life well lived?
Well, I think for me, a life well lived, and I borrow this from my grandmother, who always said to be kind. I think that a life well lived is being kind and treating people the way you would want to be treated. And if we were all just a little more kind to each other, what a better world it would be. Okay.
We'll take that. All right. We're going to put that in the chat. We're all going to be kind. We're going to raise our hand and take the pledge. We are going to be kind. Sometimes
it's simple, but it's even as simple as saying to somebody, wow, you look really nice today. I love that necklace that you're wearing, or just the little things. It doesn't have to be something monumental. But I think if we just make that extra small effort to be kind, it's amazing how much better you feel when you say a kind word to somebody, and how much better you make somebody else feel. And I think it has to be authentic. It's not, it can't be just like a pat sort of thing, but really, if you start practicing that, it's amazing how much better your life becomes, and the people around you can sense that as well.
So Skye, I'm going to practice. You look really nice today, and I really love the necklace that you're wearing. So.
I wasn't prompting you to say that.
So one of the things that we say a lot at Changing the Narrative is just don't talk about it, be about it. We're trying, our goal is not simply to increase awareness of ageism or expose ageism. We literally do. And, the big, hairy, audacious goal, we want to end ageism. But looking at your work, and I'm sure that there are people who are on this call who are thinking, wow, I'd love to interview, people in my family, other older adults in my community. What ideas do you have for people who might want to do this, who are not professional filmmakers or artists like you are? And then do you have any ideas of what we could do with this as a movement?
That's a really good question. I would love for it to become a movement, and we're trying to do that at least in schools, but certainly this could be something that ends up in faith-based organizations and community centers everywhere. So on my website, which I believe is in the chat, there is a place called Shared Stories, and you can find some of the questions that I asked. We also post some, if people reply, then we post them on our website on the Shared Stories, so you can be part of the Lives Will Live movement. And there's also on our Take Action part of our website, our discussion guide for the film, which has all of the questions and a little prompt of how you can start a project like this. So I would say, look at that, but really just do it on a personal level. If there's somebody that that you really are interested in learning more about, sit down with them, take the time. You don't have to be a filmmaker or a photographer. I wasn't a filmmaker. I just did this out of a passion. I think instead of saying why, say why not, and follow that passion, follow that thread, and see where it takes you, and just start interviewing on your own, or if you want to make it even a bigger group, then, if you have a group in your community, reach out to them and say, I want to do this project. Let's see how we can make this happen.
I love that. And I'm going to encourage anybody who maybe has ideas on how they might do that. Go ahead and start putting those in the chat. And remember, in a few minutes, we're going to be turning it over to you to ask questions of Skye. So be thinking about those questions and putting them in the chat. So Skye, I think at Changing the Narrative, we've been doing this campaign for Older Americans Month, which is simply asking people and recording them on Zoom, answering this question: what would it look like if aging was unbound by ageism? Now, the reason we're answering that question is the theme for Older Americans Month, and May is Older Americans Month. The theme is aging unbound, and we came up with what would it look like if aging were unbound by ageism. Are you willing to play with us and record your answer to this question? We'll get it up on our social media. And
sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No problem.
Okay, so here's what you do. And anybody else who wants to record their own video, you can then send it to us or just tag us on social media. So Skye, what you'll do is you will basically ask the question first and then give your response. And the question is, what would it look like if aging was unbound by ageism?
Okay, so what would it look like if aging was unbound by ageism? Well, we would have an age-diverse world where generations work, live, and prosper together, and one's ability to thrive wouldn't be constrained by age. Instead, it would be experience, skills, knowledge, curiosity, creativity, and wisdom at every age that would be celebrated and embraced. And age would not dictate social connections and relationships. We'd welcome the richness and contributions of people across their lifespan, fostering a more inclusive, vibrant, and fulfilling experience of aging. And intergenerational connections and interactions would be the norm, nurturing mutual understanding, empathy, and collaboration among individuals of diverse age groups.
Wow. I can't wait to get that up on YouTube and on social media. Thank you, Skye, for playing.
That's a mouthful.
That was a mouthful, but it was really powerful. And we certainly believe in the power of intergenerational connection as well. So I am going to turn this over to my friend and colleague, Amy Daly. I call her my partner in anti-ageism crime. And Amy is going to go ahead, start putting your questions for Skye in the chat. And Amy is going to queue them up. And I'm going to be silent for a moment and just applaud as you ask questions.
Thanks, Janine. As people are maybe putting questions in the chat, Skye, I just wanted to say something. I was struck by the fact that you are inspiring to me. And so if I was creating this film, you would be one of the people I would want in the film. I mean, you just, really, you're inspiring to me, and you had an idea and you did it. And I think it's a great story and role. You're a wonderful role model for me.
Oh,
So I
thank
want to
you.
thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I'm sure other people feel that way as well. I do a lot at the library with intergenerational programming, connecting young people with older adults, college students with older adults, children with older adults. And I'd like to ask you to kind of reflect a little bit more on the impact on young people, on how they live their lives, on maybe their, you know, right now in the news, mental health for young people is a big thing, and declining mental health. What impact you think being around older folks can have on young people and their mental health?
Absolutely. Well, I see it very clearly with our project that we're doing. I think that, you know, when they are paired up, the older adults take time with the students. And I think that that's something that, you know, the most precious gift that we can give is the gift of our time. And I think in this world where we have been so isolated because of the pandemic, and also because we have gotten used to communicating on Zoom and not being in person and on our phones, that when we can connect people and they can have the time, all of a sudden those students feel like they're heard, maybe for the first time in like 3 years because of the pandemic, that they have somebody that really cares. That's not a parent that doesn't have to care about them, but that does, just because they care about them and they care about their story and who they are. And that joy is something that they really carry with them through this project. It's just, and they become friends for life, really. It's amazing. I think that we don't do that enough, just to make a friend without having a goal in mind. And this is just, you know, another time where these students and older adults meet and get to talk about whatever they want to talk about. So it gives them a safe space to talk about being lonely, to talk about the things that are on their minds, like climate change and the political environment, in a very safe space.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think often when we think of intergenerational programming, we think of how it helps the older folks, and we don't realize that it's a great benefit to young people as well. And I think your work really establishes that. There's a lot of love for the film and for you in the chat. I know you're not able to read it yourself, so I just want to say that. And a lot of people are curious about how they want to share the film with someone else. They want to share and watch the film with people they love. I know that it is available through Denver Public Library on our Canopy streaming service.
Yes.
So anybody with a Denver Public Library card can stream it. But I also know we have a lot of people here who are from outside of Denver. Do you have ideas or advice to people who kind of want to reach out to other people in their life and say, you have to watch this film?
Yeah. Do you mind if I put in the chat the links to it?
I don't mind at all.
So it's on a whole bunch of platforms. If people are PBS members, they can watch it on PBS Passport for free for the next 1.5 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
as you mentioned, it's on Canopy, it's available on DVD, and it's also on Amazon and iTunes. I
Oh, wow.
like a salesperson, I don't mean to feel that way, but this makes it accessible to a lot of people. So
That's wonderful. That's great news. And I'm sure in a follow-up email, we'll include that information for folks. What was the hardest thing about making this film? If you could think of, I'm sure there were lots of challenges, but what kind of comes to mind?
Having never done a film before, you know, I think that the hardest thing was just knowing the right questions to ask to get a film made. And what I learned through this process is that it's okay to ask people for help. It's okay to ask people questions. It's okay to reach out to other people. I reached out to tons of other filmmakers and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this project. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can I pick your brain? And so I think being humble and saying, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I think you're doing something wonderful. How can I learn from you? You know, people open up their hearts, and it's just amazing when you ask people about what they're passionate about, how much information they'll give you. And I think the other thing was, it was very important for me to make sure that I paid everyone that was working on my film. I think as artists, many times we get taken advantage of. They say, oh, you're going to get exposure and whatever, but you know, we still have to pay our bills. So when I'm doing a project, I make sure everyone gets paid, from my student assistants to my editor to everyone gets a wage. And I applied for a number of grants and didn't get them. I'm not a great, writing is not my forte. But what I realized was I had a big house because my stepkids had moved out, and I could rent out rooms in my house through Airbnb. And so I rent out rooms in my house through Airbnb, and that is what funds my filmmaking. And I think that sometimes you have to get creative and think outside the box of how to make something happen. I've never let money stand in the way of what I'm doing. I just think about how can I get creative about making this happen. And it's really great because the people that stay at my house, I tell them about the film. This is when I was making it because it took a long time to get made. And then they became my tribe. They were like excited when the film came to their film festival in their hometown, and they would rally the troops and get people to come. And so not only was I raising funds for the film, but I was also raising awareness for the film. And that was just a great way to make it happen.
That's incredible. I love that story. And I also, it strikes me, that's just good life advice you gave us, not just good filmmaking advice, right? And just the creativity behind how you raise the money makes me think of one of the subjects of your film. I can't remember who it was, but she went to France to learn French.
Oh, that was Evie. Yeah.
Right. She got student loans, and she was like, don't let it get in your way. Just go figure out how to do it. And you showed the same tenacity and creativity in getting this film made.
Well, I have to, since you brought up Evie, I will say that she said a line in the film that changed my life, which was that she was turning 50 and she didn't want to be a really boring, dull person in a rut. And so she didn't want to keep doing the same thing. And she decided to jump off the cliff. And I retired from teaching a year and a half ago. I'm still teaching part-time through our retirement program, but I remember thinking of her distinctly when I thought, I want to go into filmmaking full time, and I can't do it if I'm still teaching, and I'm going to jump off that cliff and not be a boring, dull person in a rut. I'm going to totally change and do something different. And it was really because of her inspiration that made that happen.
That's incredible. And that line also struck me. I actually wrote it down when she said that she was more afraid of being dull than of falling off a cliff. I remember that vividly. I'm thinking, you told us a little bit about how you chose the stories, that you had very specific stories you wanted to get, and that you really wanted a diverse group of storytellers. Were there any other things you were looking for? You had so many stories. I'm just curious what other criteria you used to whittle down to this amazing group that you ended up with.
Well, I think one thing to note is that I'm not a social scientist, I'm an artist. And so I wasn't looking for a cross-section of everyone that was 75 and older. I was really looking for people who could be positive role models for me. So, that already whittled it down a bit. And then, to be honest, the people that were left on the cutting room floor, they may have had a great story to tell, but they couldn't tell it on film. And that was something that I had to learn being a still photographer, where you would take one single photo and then maybe write a story, to, okay, now they have to tell the story, and are they engaging, and can they do it? And not everyone can. And so I really had to learn the art of being selective of who ended up in the final cut of the film.
Was it painful for you to have to?
Yes, it was very painful.
Yeah,
one of my good friends ended up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, that must have been really hard.
It was hard.
I am curious, you mentioned the little short films you did of your grandmother, the Kachina Nana.
Yeah.
Where can we watch those? Are those on YouTube?
I will send that link to you so that you can send that out in the wrap email. Okay, so just remember, we have a motto here at the university that I worked at, called it's learn by doing. And I certainly was learning by doing. So my first videos are terrible. The sound isn't good, but I will send you a link, and then you can see where I came from and where I've gotten to.
I love it. More good life advice. Learn by doing. That's fantastic. And do you have like an email, like if I want to join the Lives Well Lived movement, do you have an email list, newsletter, Substack, any of that stuff, so that I can kind of follow what you're doing?
Absolutely. So if you go to the Lives Well Lived website, there's a place where you can join our newsletter right on the website, for sure.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm just kind of looking at the chat as we talk. I don't see any other questions. Janine and Sarah, you may be able to tell me.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions, so let me go ahead and queue them up. I know it's hard to monitor chat and do this at the same time, right? So someone is wanting to have a film discussion group with her following on Facebook and Instagram. Is it all right for her to share a version that she purchases?
No, because that's for just, home use only. So you can reach out to me if you want, and thank you for asking that question. If you want to host a screening, just reach out to me through the website and we can set that up.
Okay. There was, I'm not sure, question or comment. The woman who went bankrupt because no one invested in her recycled plastic roadways is a very creative environmentalist.
Yeah.
When talking about creativity, she needs to be lifted up. Agree.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I know the answer to this question, but let me ask you, is the video available in Spanish, Skye?
Actually, yes. So it is captioned in 6 languages. So it is in Spanish, French, German, Italian, and Chinese, and I'm missing one, and I apologize. But yes, it's in all of those languages. It's also for anyone that has anyone that's visually impaired. There's also descriptions for visually impaired. So we've got every base covered, of course, and captioning, of course.
Okay. And then I'm going to queue up a final question, and then we're going to, we've got a breakout room question for all of you who are here, because we kind of want to get a sense of the room, how you might apply some of this. So, but here's a, oh, actually, now the questions are just popping up. The more you talk, Skye, the more comments and questions come up. So you mentioned your intergenerational groups. What kind of advice have older people gotten from younger people in those intergenerational groups? Can you share any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more that the stereotypes of younger people have been busted, right? Because I think the older generation goes into it thinking, oh, they're just on their iPhones, they don't think about anything, they don't care about the future, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. And I think that in having those deep dive conversations one-on-one, all of those myths are busted. And so I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that a lot of the older people come away feeling like they are much more hopeful for the future after talking to young people one-on-one. And they, instead of lumping everyone into this one group of like, oh, this group does this, they know somebody from that younger generation, and all of a sudden their stereotypes are completely changed about what the younger generation is all about and what they're doing.
Okay. Would you consider doing another film interviewing? I know you're doing several films now. Would you consider doing another film interviewing older adults who speak languages other than English?
I would love to. I mean, I would love to do a series of Lives Well Lived. I would definitely need to get funding for that the next time, because I don't want to have to. I basically did everything from the filming to the recording. I don't want to have to do that again. So, but I would love to do it in other languages. Absolutely.
So Skye, this is probably not the time to tell you, in my past career, before my encore and Changing the Narrative, I wrote highly successful grant proposals. We'll talk later. Anyway, and I'll do, I keep saying final question, but then this really, did you get any negative comments from people in the video, or people left on the cutting room floor? Because I'm imagining if I get really excited and I've told all my friends, I'm going to be in Skye's film, and then I get the call.
Yeah, well, so no. What I did do was, for those of you that saw the film, I did montages of questions. So I tried to include everyone in the film in some way, whether they weren't a primary person, but they might have been part of a montage in the film. Everyone that I interviewed got a film credit at the end, which was really important to me. And then on the website, there's also all of the film stars, and I included all 40 people. I picked my favorite quote from each of those interviews and put them on the website. So I tried to do the best that I could in terms of really, elevating everyone. I also gave everyone that I interviewed all of the recordings, so they had that to give to their families, and all the transcripts. So they had something that they could take away, which I felt like was really important. Yeah.
Okay, great. So what I'm doing now, everyone, is I am putting in the question that we would like you to answer in the chat or in the breakout room, but I'm putting the question in the chat. And the questions are this: what lessons did you take away, and what personal wisdom do you have that you might want to share about living life to the fullest? Sarah is going to put you in breakout rooms. Skye will end up in one of your breakout rooms. You get to meet her personally. And so just have a brief conversation about that. We're talking like literally, 5 to 6 minutes, talk with others. And then as you come out, we'll ask you to share some of that wisdom with all of us in the chat. And again, the question is, or the questions are, and I'm clicking the chat now, what lessons did you take away from Skye's film? And what wisdom would you want to share about living life to the fullest? So Sarah, can I ask you to put people into breakout rooms? And please, all you'll do is click the join button and we'll see you on the other side where Skye will share what she's doing next.
If they just can't have that positive attitude, either because of internalized ageism, because of depression, because of things that have happened in their lives, like, I don't know if you developed any wisdom around that, around developing that attitude, I guess, or cultivating that attitude, not just having it, but creating it maybe, especially when there might be mental health problems.
I think it's really, it's hard if people, we had that in our group too. There was somebody that was talking about, they watched it with a friend of theirs and they said, oh, this is all pie in the sky people. And I think there are some people that are going to be that way and the film is not going to resonate with. And some people are just have a negative attitude and it's really hard sometimes to dig them out of that. But I think sometimes just being present with them, talking to them, trying to figure out what is it that's creating that negative attitude and what can you do as a friend and an ally to help pull them out from that moment. It could be something really simple. It could be something that you can't help them, but you just be there and be supportive would be my advice.
Yeah. Anything else that came out of your group, Amy?
One of the people in my group did talk about how inspiring it was and talked about getting out of the taxi lane and getting onto the runway, like just being reminded. I think there is in our very ageist culture this idea of comfort, inertia, no longer challenging ourselves, decline, that we unintentionally buy into, or we aren't even aware that that's happening to us. And so being reminded to kind of wake up and get back in the fast lane and get back into the growth mindset for ourselves is really powerful.
Love that. Love that. All right, Skye, you have the final word. Can you share with us not only maybe what the discussion was in your group, but also I think we all want to know what's next with you.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had a great discussion on our group about, the film and the words of wisdom, but I think it was very similar to what we've already discussed. So what I will share is that I'm actually working on a book, which hopefully will be out next May. And it's about my experience making lives well lived and the wisdom that I learned, but also interviewing, because I interviewed 40 people for my film, I'm interviewing 40 people for the book who are doing very interesting work around intergenerational projects and connecting generations, from an intergenerational symphony to co-generational housing, really running the gamut to inspire other people to work to connect generations in interesting and unique ways. And I'm also working on a film called Mochisuki, which came out of Lives Well Lived. One of the people in the film, Susie Edo Bauman, who's Japanese American, invited me to her family's Mochisuki ceremony, which is a ceremony that they do the week between Christmas and New Year's to make mochi, which is pounding rice, and in order to bring in the new year. And I love the intergenerational connections that happen and all the groups coming together. And so I'm working on that film right now, which will be out on PBS May of 2024 for Asian Pacific Islander month. So those are my two big projects right now.
That sounds so exciting. Thank you. I'm noticing, Jen, Kubik, thank you for putting that comment in the chat that in your group shared very positive outlook, such as we are still wondering what we will be when we grow up. My last conversation with my daughters was, and having just turned 70, and it was literally, oh, Mom, you're still trying to figure out what you will be when you grow up. And I am. So if anybody has suggestions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Anyway, Skye, if all of you can join me in thanking Skye, let's go ahead, or virtual, unmute yourself and let's just applaud. I am so grateful. not only that you've shared that amazing film with us, but also joined us for this conversation today. So thank you. And thank you all so much for all of you for being here to be part of our Changing the Narrative in Denver Public Library community. I think you know our collective goal. Our goal is to end ageism, and I truly believe it's possible. And we do that by having conversations like this, by uplifting films like Skye. So thank you all so much for being part of our community. Have a lovely rest of the
Thank
week.
you, everybody. Thank you,
Bye.
Janine.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sarah. Thanks, Skye.
Have a good rest of the day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.